I want to start with something that's been sitting in my head since last night, because three completely different stories dropped within about 24 hours of each other. And honestly, when you put them side by side, they tell you almost everything you need to know about where this Raiders organization stands right now, heading into camp. One of them is a rumor I need to kill immediately before it spreads any further. One of them is a genuinely heartwarming moment involving our own rookie quarterback. And the last one is a confession from a Hall of Fame coach that still stings every single time I hear it, even years later. So let's get into all three, because there's a lot to unpack here. Let's rip the band-aid off first, because I know this is the headline that's been bouncing around your timeline. There's chatter out there, some of it coming from Hondau Carpenter, suggesting Justin Jefferson could eventually push for a trade to Las Vegas, specifically to reunite with Chip Kelly. And look, I need to shut this down right here, right now, before anyone gets their hopes up for no reason. As of this moment, there is absolutely no realistic path where the Raiders are marching into Minnesota's front office and prying away one of the 2 or 3 best receivers on the planet. I don't believe Jefferson is anywhere close to wanting out of Minnesota either. That franchise is going to ride this season out and see how things develop, especially with Kyler Murray now settled in at quarterback for us. And honestly, I think we're in a good spot with what we already have. Jalen Naylor just arrived from the Vikings this offseason, and that reunion angle with the coaching staff is a nice story on its own. No need to manufacture a bigger one. Now, would I love to see Justin Jefferson in silver and black? Of course I would. Show me a Raiders fan who wouldn't want that kind of talent lining up on our side of the ball. If it somehow took giving up a future first-round pick to make it happen, I'd sign off on that trade in a heartbeat, no hesitation. But wanting something and it actually being realistic are two completely different conversations. And right now, this is firmly in fantasy territory. I think part of why this rumor even caught fire in the first place is because it's an easy connection to draw on paper, a familiar coaching voice, a receiver need everybody can see, and a fan base that's been starving for a true #1 target for years now. It's the kind of story that sounds believable precisely because it plugs a hole we all know exists. But sounding believable and having any real substance behind it are two very different things. And right now, there's nothing beyond a single name floating a theory. So let's set that rumor aside completely and talk about something that actually happened, something worth genuinely celebrating. Fernando Mendoza just picked up another trophy, this time for Best College Athlete at the recent ESPYs. And I have to be honest with you, watching his acceptance speech hit me in a way I wasn't fully expecting. There's a version of these speeches that feels rehearsed, scripted, hollow. This wasn't that. He led with his faith, which as someone who values that in a young man really resonated with me, and then he immediately turned the spotlight away from himself entirely. He talked about football being the ultimate team sport, about how even though a single name sits on that trophy, it belongs to everyone who helped him get there, his family, his coaches, the Hoosier faithful who backed him, and especially his teammates. It was the kind of moment that makes you believe you're watching someone who understands what actually matters before the fame and the money change the picture. And here's the thing that got me sitting there afterward, just shaking my head in disbelief. This is a guy who's barely scratched the surface of his career, and he's already stacking hardware before he's thrown a single professional pass. So naturally, my mind jumped straight to the future. What does his speech sound like when he's holding a Rookie of the Year trophy? What does it sound like when he's got an MVP award in his hands? And if we're being honest about the dream scenario here, what does it sound like the night he's standing on a stage holding a Lombardi trophy? I know that's getting way ahead of ourselves, and I know how quickly these narratives can shift once real bullets start flying on Sundays. But let a fan dream for a second, especially after years of this fan base watching quarterback situations collapse before they ever really got going. In all seriousness though, it's genuinely refreshing to watch a young player carry himself like this, heading into the pressure cooker of professional football, humble in front of the cameras, sharp when he needs to be, grounded in something bigger than the game itself. And I'm excited to see exactly how his story unfolds in silver and black. But here's the part of this whole ESPYs moment that really caught me off guard, because I did not know this kid had this kind of edge to him. Someone at the ceremony tried to get clever at his expense, tossing out a comment that was clearly meant to be a playful jab about his Latino heritage and his fair complexion. And Fernando, without missing a beat, without even flinching, fired right back with a line about proving that Latinos can be tall too, delivered with this dry, confident calm that completely flipped the exchange in his favor. The room loved it. I loved it. Because that kind of composure under a live camera, that ability to take a shot and immediately return one with a smile instead of getting flustered, that's not something you can coach. That's just who he is. And honestly, watching that clip back, it reminded me a little bit of how Tom Brady has always handled himself when someone tries to needle him publicly, calm, sharp, and completely unbothered. If Fernando's career ends up tracking anywhere near that trajectory, I think we'd all take that deal without a second thought, because that path tends to end with a lot of championship parades. And speaking of Tom Brady, since he's now got real ownership stake and influence around this organization, he actually addressed Fernando Mendoza directly in a recent conversation, and what he said genuinely stuck with me. Brady made it clear he has real affection for the kid, but he was equally clear that Fernando is going to be treated exactly like every other young player walking into this league for the first time. Nobody gets a free pass just because of where they were drafted. Brady pointed out that despite all the buildup, despite being the #1 overall pick, Fernando hasn't taken a single meaningful snap in a real NFL game yet, and that until he does, none of the hype actually means anything on paper. He emphasized that a young player's entire career and legacy gets shaped by the work they put in behind the scenes, by how they respond when adversity actually shows up, and by what kind of teammate they choose to be when the cameras aren't rolling. And he tied that mentality directly back to how things work in the business world too. And honestly, hearing Brady frame it that way is music to my ears as a fan, because it tells me exactly what I was hoping to hear. Just because Fernando is the #1 pick, just because he's being positioned as the long-term face of this franchise, that doesn't mean this coaching staff is going to rush him onto the field before he's actually ready. I know there's a segment of the fan base clamoring for him to start immediately, pads on, day 1 of the regular season. But if you genuinely want this young man to have a long, sustainable, successful career, you don't throw him into the fire before he's prepared for it. You let him learn the system first, and you put him in the game when the moment is actually right. That's the entire reason this front office went out and secured a genuine bridge option at quarterback in the first place. And this isn't some brand new philosophy either. This has been the exact same message repeated throughout this entire offseason by the coaching staff, by the front office, and honestly, by Fernando and the veteran quarterback room themselves. Everybody involved seems to understand the same simple truth. Whoever gives this team the best chance to win is going to be the one taking snaps once the regular season actually kicks off in September. Fernando picked up praise from another respected voice too. Desmond Howard spoke glowingly about him recently, essentially predicting that Fernando is set up for a genuinely strong rookie campaign. Howard pointed to something specific that I think matters a lot here, the fact that Fernando made a calculated decision to transfer programs. And it wasn't about chasing a bigger paycheck or a flashier spotlight. It was about finding an environment that would actually develop him into a complete quarterback, someone who could walk into any defensive look and already have an answer ready. Howard basically said that the way this young man approaches the game mentally gives him real confidence that Fernando is going to have a fantastic first season at this level, even acknowledging he's not entirely sure what kind of weapons Fernando has around him on the outside just yet, but he still walked away convinced the kid is going to be just fine. Before we move away from Fernando and Brady entirely, there's one more moment worth mentioning because it made its way around social media pretty quickly. The two of them appeared together at a major fan convention in New York, where they helped unveil the top overall selection for a crossover collaboration between a major entertainment studio and the league. And wouldn't you know it, the #1 pick in that particular exercise went to none other than Darth Vader himself, which honestly, if you're trying to pick a character that embodies the Raiders brand, the dark aesthetic, the intimidating presence, the villain energy, other fan bases love to hate, you really can't do much better than Darth Vader. I'm not entirely sure what tangible impact this has on the franchise long term, if any at all, but it was a fun moment making the rounds online, and I figured it was worth mentioning here. Now let's shift into the part of this video that hits a little differently, because it involves a story from this franchise's past that still leaves a mark every time it resurfaces. John Gruden sat down recently and opened up about Antonio Brown, specifically about that entire chapter when Brown arrived in Las Vegas. And Gruden's honesty about how it all unraveled was almost painful to listen to, even all these years later. Gruden talked about how he spent his entire coaching life chasing after players he genuinely covets, guys he truly wants on his roster no matter the cost. And he described watching Antonio Brown practice during his time with the Steelers, saying he was so relentless, so obsessive about his craft, that Gruden half believed if there wasn't a fence surrounding that practice facility, Brown would have wandered straight into oncoming traffic just from how locked in he was on football. He said he hadn't witnessed that level of practice intensity from anyone since watching Jerry Rice work, and that alone told him he had to find a way to bring Brown into the building no matter what it cost. And then Gruden described those few OTA sessions where Brown was actually out there running real routes in the Raiders' offense, and just how electric that looked in real time. He admitted that one night after watching Brown work, he went home and opened a bottle of wine and drank the entire thing alone, completely convinced that this offense was about to complete every single pass thrown that season. He called it one of his biggest personal regrets, watching that potential evaporate before it ever got the chance to show up on a Sunday. And listening to Gruden relive that moment, it pulled me right back into that entire era. The build-up, the hype, the absolute chaos that eventually followed. I remember exactly how excited I was when the trade for Brown first went down, because we gave up next to nothing for him. A mid-round pick here, a late-round pick there. Essentially pennies for a player many considered the best receiver in football at that time. Derek Carr was still fighting to prove he could be an elite starting quarterback, and it genuinely felt like all this offense needed was one true alpha receiver to unlock everything else around him. The front office delivered exactly that, on paper at least, and then it just completely fell apart before a single regular season snap was played. We had the behind-the-scenes cameras following us that summer, the entire league expecting this team to make real noise that year, and instead we all watched it collapse in real time for reasons that had nothing to do with football. That season will always be remembered as the one that never actually happened. But I still genuinely believe that if Antonio Brown had actually suited up alongside Derek Carr that year, this roster had enough talent surrounding them to make a real push. I think we're talking about a team that makes the playoffs and competes once they get there, not just a token appearance either. It's one of those what-if scenarios that still lingers in the back of my mind whenever this era of Raiders football comes up in conversation. And honestly, hearing Gruden's own voice crack with that same regret all these years later only confirms what a lot of us already suspected quietly the whole time, that this wasn't just a fan base overreacting to what could have been. The guy who lived it, the guy who coached it from the sideline, still thinks about that lost season too. And that tells you everything about how close this organization actually was to something special before it all slipped away. It's strange looking back on it now, because at the time it felt like the sky was falling, like this franchise had just handed away a golden opportunity through no fault of its own. And in a lot of ways, that's exactly what happened. But there's also something almost instructive about revisiting that story today, right as this organization is once again building something new around a completely different set of faces. It's a reminder that talent alone was never the problem here. It's a reminder that the margin between a competitive roster and a wasted opportunity can come down to factors that have nothing to do with scheme or personnel evaluation at all. And it's a reminder, whether we like it or not, that this franchise has been here before, standing at the edge of something promising, only to watch it unravel for reasons nobody could have fully planned for. So that's everything on my mind heading into this stretch of the offseason. And I'm curious where you all land on it. Are you fired up for training camp? Because it is right around the corner now, and I know I'll be out there for a handful of sessions myself, and I'll definitely be at the stadium for preseason action too. I've genuinely missed this. I've enjoyed the slower pace of the offseason, don't get me wrong, the mock drafts, the free agency speculation, the quiet stretches where you can just sit back and imagine every possibility without any of it being tested on the field yet. But there's nothing quite like football season actually arriving, when we all get to come together, talk ball, and hope this franchise finally turns the corner in a real way. Because if you step back and really look at everything we just talked about, the Jefferson rumor that isn't going anywhere, the young quarterback who's already showing the kind of composure and character you can't teach, and that painful old wound from the Antonio Brown era that still hasn't fully healed, it all points to the same underlying tension every Raiders fan carries into every single season. We've seen glimpses of what this franchise could be, and we've also seen exactly how quickly that potential can slip through our fingers when the details fall apart around the edges. This year feels different in some ways, mostly because of how deliberately this front office seems to be building things now. Patience at quarterback, smart asset management instead of chasing splashy names just to make headlines, real accountability at the top of the organization. But feeling different and actually being different are two things this fan base has learned the hard way not to confuse. Maybe we see Fernando under center at some point this year, maybe we don't, and honestly that's fine either way as long as the process is being handled the right way, because a rushed decision now could cost us years of development later, and I'd rather wait for the right moment than force one just to satisfy impatience. Whatever happens, whatever direction this season takes, I'll be right there covering every angle of it with you all, home games included, because that's what this whole thing is actually about at the end of the day, showing up, staying honest about what we're watching, and riding out every twist this franchise throws at us together.